We are.
Okay. Hello.
And
Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here with you, wherever you may be. Yes. We're here to have a conversation for some time around this idea of Earth and transition. So my name is Aubrey Yee. I come from Hawaii. I'm immersed in understanding how change happens through different ways of thinking, uh, futures, systems, how to design new futures, all of those sorts of things. I'll let Rutendo introduce herself and my friend Pipa, and we're going to have just a really beautiful conversation about what do we mean when we say Earth in transition? What is being asked of us at this time? What is the Earth saying to us? How do we listen? Those sorts of things. People will lead us through a short breath. Rutendo?
My name is Rutendo Ngara. I'm an Indigenous knowledge carrier from Southern Africa, but having immersed in and initiated in quite a number of the traditions within Africa and working to bridge knowledge paradigms, particularly with the Indigenous knowledge holders and activists from around the globe.
My name is Pipa Cardoso. I come from Portugal, and I've been traveling for many years and considering like new ways of living life in harmony with ourselves, with our kin, and with the whole earth. And I work with breath and as a primary tool for shifting our state of being and that of the collective.
Pipa, if you want to lead us through a short grounding breath.
So if you want to find a comfortable position to sit in and have your spine erect, just taking a moment to drop into the now, focusing our attention on our breath for a few cycles. Just tuning in, just becoming the observer of the movement of the breath. How's my breath in this moment? Is it deep, shallow, fast, or slow, or something in between? What parts of my body is the breath touching? Not trying to change anything in this moment, just becoming aware. Much like a scientist would observe its object of study. Familiarizing ourselves with our breath. I want to invite us now to drop our attention into the center of our chest, the space of the heart. To feel the heart. And if it helps, you might want to place hand, back fingers, thumb on the heart. And allowing our breaths to become a little slower, a little deeper than usual. Whatever slower is for you, you might be breathing in on the count of 5, breathing out a little slower even. And the invitation is for us to imagine that the breath is flowing in and out of the heart space. As if the heart itself is breathing. keeping the space and keeping the focus on the hearts. For a few more cycles. Feeling how the shift in awareness, the shift in pace, the shift in breath. It's perhaps shifting our inner state a few moments ago. Knowing that as the heart shifts, it has the power to shift all the systems and organs in our bodies. Yes. And through intention, we can activate this thing, biotechnology that we all own. Stay, keeping the breath slow, soft, deep. Staying with our hearts. I invite us all to come back into the space, open our eyes.
After a long and windy drive to get here. Rutendo. So thinking about this notion of earth in transition and this moment we're in, and really understanding the depth of what we might call the polycrisis or the metacrises or the multiple crises happening all at once and the pressures that's placing on us as human beings, and also understanding that, you know, systems are not broken, they're actually perfectly designed to produce the results we see. And yet we live in this world that we know is not producing the results of thriving for humanity. So I'm curious, you do deep work on speaking to Earth and understanding her languages. And so I'd be curious to know how you think about the ways that we listen to the Earth in this time and what it means to listen to Earth in a time of such cacophony of sort of human crises, suffering, and all that's happening.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Olivia, for inviting me here. Yesterday, we had an incredible, beautiful experience in a cave surrounded by the mountains with the river flowing by. And we all introduced ourselves in the circle with our mountains and with our rivers that bring us into that space. And for me, the mountains and the rivers in the dance with each other transition, because the mountain is the stillness in transition, while the river shows the movement in transition towards the ocean that refuses no river. And this brings us into indigenous concepts of the dynamic still point, you know, where you can be still and moving at the same time. And this is what nature is forever showing us, the possibility to live the paradox. And unfortunately, where modernity has taken us is moving us away from being able to hold the paradox into trying to put everything into linear boxes. That has moved us away from being able to be the river and the mountain at the same time. And so we do not know how to move and be still like the mountain, which many of our indigenous knowledges will tell us about. Now, in 2019, the Southern Hemisphere had the largest tropical storm recorded in history. It's created a lot of havoc, you know, from the Indian Ocean, within countries like Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and really created a lot of floods and destruction, you know, in its wake. Now, what was really interesting about this cyclone is that, you know, how the names of tropical storms are given in alphabetical order. And so that one was given the name with the letter I, because that was the letters I that was up to the next storm. And it was given the name Idai. Now, Idai is in Shona, it is an injunction to love. It is a command. It is not freely love. It is love that is fierce, love that is interconnectedness, interdependence, and interrelatedness. Love that realizes that everything is our relative. That love is based on divine truth, and that is called love. So this tropical storm that created so much havoc and destruction was actually there to rouse up love. It was an injunction, a demand, a command to love. And that is what nature is speaking to us all the time. And the way that storm manifests itself also speaks to another principle within our indigenous knowledge systems from Africa, from Ghana this time, which is Sankofa. What it is that we feed into the present will result in the future. But we, as agents of creation, have the potential to feed that future back into the past. And when we feed that future back into the past, the present that it creates is a future that has a better potential for emergence or transition or beauty or whatever it is that we bring into communication. So it's important for us to be able to be both forward and backward looking. In our African traditions, in our indigenous knowledge systems, there's no separation between those that walk before, those that are walking now, and those that are yet to come. We are all part of the great cycle of life. We're all in flux and we're all in common communication. So our ancestors are not just flowing through our veins in genealogy. They're flowing through our veins because they are present here. Here we are in a place of trees. We say, according to Ubuntu, that trees are persons because trees tell us about that ability to move from that which is below, that world below, which may be those that come from behind, the ancestors, to the trunk, which is that which is present now, to the branches, which is that which is going into the future. So this is what we call Ubuntu. Ubuntu is the manifestation of what we just did now, which is the breath. The breath in many of our African languages, the word for breath is not separate from the word for spirit, which is not separate from the word for air. So when we speak about umoya, the breath, we're activating the cosmic principle, the singularity, and I believe Bruce Lyon spoke about it yesterday, the dynamic life force, which is called Ubuntu. And we transform that Ubuntu through this ability to breathe, through the cycles which Sankofa tells us about, the universal cycle of feedback, in order to be able to manifest life. And that is what Ubuntu is about. We have been subjected to a very anthropocentric idea of what Ubuntu is. We think that Ubuntu is just about how we relate as humans, but the world is so much more than humans. The world is filled with persons. We are persons, and by persons, if we go into the Latin root of that, we're saying those that are of sound, those that are created by that fundamental force of sound, that which was spoken into being, that which is slower than light, so that it can eventually manifest and coalesce into form, into that which is objectified. And that is transferred through the breath with this quantum principle called Ubuntu. And when that Ubuntu manifests in us, humans, the persons of human form, as we say, we call it Muntu, the reasoned form of Ubuntu. And then when there's many of us, like we are here, we call it Bantu. So I come from the Bantu people, but from our cosmology, we are all Bantu, because we are all the human reasoned form, the person form of Ubuntu. But then Ubuntu does not end there, because Ubuntu does not end with humans. Ubuntu, as I said, moves through the trees, and because the trees carry the different realms of being from the roots to the trunk to the branches, we say that this is our original ancestor, that communicates with us, which is why when somebody dies, we'll plant a tree so that their spirit lives on. And when their spirit lives on, Umoya lives on, the breath lives on. And when Umoya lives on, when the breath lives on, then we have the potential through that interaction to be able to create clean air, because we realize that the air and the spirit, the breath are one. It's always about the interrelatedness, the interconnectedness, and interdependence of all things. But then Ubuntu does not only end there, as I said, it also manifests in that which we may say unreasoned beings. It manifests in the cave that we were in yesterday, in the rocks. It manifests in the waters. It manifests in the animals. It manifests in those that fly, those that crawl. It manifests in those that are seated deep within the earth through the fires of the gurglings in the core of the earth. And that is what we call Ubuntu. So Ubuntu manifests with this Ubuntu or Ubuntu in plural. But Ubuntu doesn't end there, because Ubuntu is that quantum principle that is related to everything. It also manifests in time and space. And that is what we call Ubuntu. And from our African Indigenous perspective, time and space collapse into a single continuum. Quantum physics only discovered this about 150 years ago. They're catching up slowly. What we have always said, so things are named according to time and space. So, for instance, if you come to South Africa, you may find a place called Hamulina or Kwandelele or Hamujaji. These prefixes denote temporality and locality. So everything has a place in time and space, and that is collapsed. So when we were standing there, having the earth dance or being in the cave, we were experiencing time and space collapsed into a single continuum, allowing us to connect to the great ancestors of humans, but also the great ancestors of the mountains, allowing us to be able to be in harmony with that, to listen to how best we can go forward into the future. And when we do that, then we go into the last principle of Ubuntu, which is Ubuntu, which is that which we experience that we do not see, that which we sense without necessarily understanding. Whether it may be the great fear that we're experiencing in this time of crisis, or whether it may be that inner knowing that we have as a collective, that actually, if we come together in this interdependence, interrelatedness, and interconnectedness of Ubuntu, we have that ability to step back into the future, feed it back into the past to create the present that will create a greater future.
So beautiful. Thank you for all of that. As you're speaking, I'm thinking about the aliveness of all the terms you're speaking to, and this idea that everything, the chair, the rocks, this blanket, the computer, all has an aliveness to it. And you mentioned a few times the notion of Indigenous knowledge systems or Indigenous knowledge sciences. And maybe you could share a little bit more about what that is and how might that way of understanding or thinking help in this time?
I think my favorite way of explaining Indigenous knowledge systems is to tell the story of the river. And so Africa has got many rivers, and it's got amazing rivers. It's got the longest river in the world. It's got the Nile River, which flows from south to north. In spite of this understanding in modernity that everything should flow from north to south. The longest river in the world flows from south to north, the global south. Then we have the deepest and most powerful river in the world, the Congo River. And this river is born from the great wound of Africa. It is the great East African Rift Valley, where the African continent is starting to split apart. And this is a place of high volcanic activity and a high, tectonic activity. So it is a great wound. It is from this wound that the deepest and most powerful river in the world is. And it flows into the Congo, which then makes this the most water-rich country in the world, in Africa. Unfortunately, water is scarce now because of great civil war, over resources to extract, which has created non-potency in the freshwater, potability in the freshwater resources, and thus has rendered the most water-rich country in the continent water scarce. With the most powerful river, the deepest, most powerful river flowing through it. This is just an indication of how Indigenous knowledge systems have been stripped apart. The other river that we have is the river with the greatest curtain of water in the world. The Msiwatunya, the smoke that thunders, the Kasamambezi River. Kasamambezi means only he or she who knows can cross. Only he or she who knows the ways of the rapids. Only he or she who knows the ways of the cycles of the river. Only he or she who knows the ways of the crocodiles or the hippos. Only he or she who is in complete resonance with the river can cross it. It's been adulterated to Zambezi River, now, but the largest waterfall in the world, the Siwatuga or Victoria Falls flowing through it. And this river was born initially in what is now known as Makgadikgadi, the plains of Makgadikgadi. It now arises in Zambia under a myombo tree before it eventually drains into the into the Indian Ocean. But what our ancestors, as I said, everything is named according to Hantu with the locality and the temporality. The original source of the Zambezi River is called Makgadikgadi. Makgadikgadi, when we break it down, and I had to go and really ask around to find out what that means. So Ma denotes the mother, obviously. Hala, you know, it's also, it can denote that, it can denote crying, but it can also denote dry. So this place is now a desert, and now the river does not start from there anymore. So this place is called Makgadikgadi. It's the place of the great giants and the place of the great clients. You know, the place where the feminine spirit has been denuded, has been sucked away, so that the river does not start there anymore. The indigenous elders named that with their knowledge of understanding that that used to be the source of the river. And it is only in recent times that modern science has been able to qualify and verify that which indigenous science has always known, because when you step into the place, you're able to feel the presence of the river that was, and to feel the interdependence between the river and the feminine, and to feel that because of that, there's the great dryings and the great fires. But the last river I'd like to speak about, which really talks about indigenous knowledge systems, is the Niger River. And the Niger is a river that arises 250 kilometers from the Atlantic Ocean in the Guinea Highlands. Modern science or modernity and modern economics will tell us that if it's an efficient river, it should flow from the highlands to the ocean, 250 kilometers from the high point down to the ocean. But this river defies that. It moves into the desert. It moves to the other. It moves into that which has no that. And then some modern science will say, well, since it's on that path, let it go and drain with the Nile River in the Mediterranean Sea. Let it follow a linear path. But it defies linearity. It says, I'm not going to be linear. And so it turns and for some reason it turns where there used to be one of the greatest universities in Timbuktu, you know, and then it turns and it starts this long sinuous route, you know, through many countries until it eventually drains into the Atlantic Ocean after more than 4,100 kilometers. What should have been 250 kilometers if it had followed efficiently. Now, as it is flowing, sometimes it's not flowing down a gradient, so it's not being efficient. Sometimes it is flowing on flat ground, sometimes it's going up a gradient. So it becomes highly inefficient, it's sluggish. And the sluggishness means that it's precipitation. The sluggishness means that it has the ability to create lakes as large as Belgium. Wow. It's able to create great sources of biodiversity. It's able to create great sustenance that supports the mineral, you know, the mineral richness. So all of this, and as it's doing that, it's connecting along the way, creating life for more than 40 different types of people, so 40 peoples. It is the second most biodiverse part of Africa. And that is because it defies efficiency. You know, it's effective. Yeah. It defies linearity, which is chaotically circular. You know, it defies the need to, it allows for the sluggishness of stillness. And that stillness is what creates sources of biodiversity and life. So inefficiency creates life. And this is indigenous life. So beautiful. Olivia, how much time do we have?
Yeah, because my phone is sharing.
It's 11:25.
Okay, so we have, if we can take like 10 minutes more, that would be great.
You were speaking about this idea of like feeling the river there. It's like that multi-sensory aspect to me of indigenous ways of knowing. So it's a big piece of it. And just back to that first question of like, how do we listen to the earth? I know you have to hear pulse from the earth. What is she speaking? What is she saying to us?
Well, a big cry from the earth at this time is to listen. And she keeps seeking to pull her children towards it. And a quantum physicist that we used to work with, always spoke about how, a lot of people attribute the great shift to, or the great break from the earth to the age of enlightenment, the 17th century age of enlightenment, when reason, and the mind, overcame everything. Then we started seeing reductional, we started seeing, duality, we started seeing, all of these principles that the modern world is premised upon. But David Peat, the quantum physicist, took it further back. He took it further back to the 13th century in Europe, because he was looking at when did Europe lose its salt to become separated.
Yeah.
And he says it was with the introduction of the clock. Before that, we were all seen as midwives to nature. We are here constantly birthing or supporting the birthing of nature. And by that way, nature constantly doulas us, into our birthing. But then the introduction of the clock came, and suddenly time, which was flow, which was the river, which was the cycles of the moon, which was the cycles of the sun, suddenly time became discrete. And suddenly we had 60 seconds in something called a minute, and then we had 60 minutes in something called an hour, and then we had 24 hours in something called a day, and then you had, and so everything just became this quantification and discreteness. And then moving away from that, we started moving away from flow time. We started moving away from the cycles that nature brings towards us. And as we moved away from that, then we started saying you can waste time. You can buy time. You can lose time. And yet those principles don't make sense, because time is just what is.
Yeah.
Time is
the eternal now.
It's
Yeah.
the eternal now. And so here we are as humanity in this disjuncture, racing against time. And this concept of time that we're racing against is a concept that is unusual. So nature is asking us to go back into the flow. It's asking us to go back into the dynamic still point where you are the mountain and the river at the same time, simultaneously holding that paradox. It's asking us to listen to the different realms that the tree tells us about. It's asking us to know how to be rooted and yet completely, having our branches, to the stars, to be connected deep within and to be connected above. It's asking us to be gentle. It's asking us to remember the feminine, because the feminine is seen in the waters. We have brought in fires, we brought in pollution, we brought in all of that. And as we see the pollution of the rivers, so we see gender-based violence. So we see how all of that manifests in the ways we tend or not tend to nature. And ultimately, nature is telling us that, and I'll go back into my Kemetic roots, that the root of that word nature, if we go further back to the Latin, it's natura, which is the essence. We need to go back to the essence. But let's go further back etymologically to the African root of that word, and that is nater. Nater is all that is. Nature is telling us to go back to being all that is. And in that way we become all that is, and in that way we're also able to be tending for. We'll also be able to be conserving. We'll also be able to be in relation, reciprocal relativity with nature. And in that way, we go back to our essential nature, which is the interdependence, interconnectedness, and interrelatedness with all that.
That's so beautiful. I'm seeing all the time and the circular nature and how this now moment is so precious. I'm curious, as you close, if you could offer any sort of practice or way that people think about how to listen to nature. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
no, I would just, it was actually very similar. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I feel so much resonance and truth in what you're speaking to, and from even just my own, I think, spiritual experiences as well. And so I'm curious, in this time where we have quantified time and life, and and all the modernity they speak to, how do you connect to how do you connect to
you know, the mountains and the stillness within you, and the moving of the river that's within you? How do you connect to what is, that is just time, that is, and, you know, and remember and move from that place when everything else is going against the grain, and then advice for how others, like people like that, should do as well.
Well, our elders always talk about 5 important things, you know, that just root us in. Personally, right now, here I am wearing these boots in this amazing place called nature when I could have taken my shoes off.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Shoes off. Easy and free.
It's easy and free. It's that instant connection, you know, it's that instant connection to hearing the heartbeat of the planet, you know, that is moving, you know, between us and within us. And even if we get the different textures, you know, in terms of the rocks, if we get the different textures in terms of the thorns that make, you know, all of that is the fullness of life that we're able to experience, you know, with our feet. And we know from reflexology that our whole body is mapped, you know, on the feet. So that ability to connect, you know, we become like the serpent who connects with us whole being, you know, on the earth. Our feet give us that perspective. If only we're humble enough to take our shoes off, because taking off the shoes is a sign of humility, and humility to all that is. The next is 5 things, you know. It is how we eat, you know, and being conscious of how we eat and what we eat, you know, which is really, really good. It is how we drink, being conscious of how and what we drink from, you know, where it came from, the story behind everything that is presented to you that you're ingesting into your being. And, you know, because eventually it will take you to the tree, it will eventually take you to the river, you know, if we are willing to go beyond just what's in front of me, but, you know, just a bit further on. So it is how we move and how we exercise, you know, how we allow this temple that we've been, you know, given, you know, to interact, you know, to move, to come, to allow movement to happen within us. You know, it is how we breathe, you know, umoya, allowing that breath, you know, to activate and animate the spirit, you know, and it is how we sleep as well, because we are in this time, because we're in this time space, we're forever in sympathetic mode. We never get into parasympathetic mode. We never get into the place of being, you know, because we're constantly reacting, moving, because we're running against time, because time is against us.
Yeah.
And yet time is
Running out of time. Yeah.
Time is always with us. It's always with us. And so our elder says literally those 5 things, which may seem totally unspiritual.
No, it's
You know,
deeply spiritual.
you know,
actually.
you know, they're about really connecting with all that is
Yeah.
and remembering all that is. And from there, it is the meditative practices, it is the different breath practices, you know, all of that, you know, but just those 5 simple things, I'd say are critical to starting to have. And then, of course, as much as possible, being in places like this, where we can connect with the true and just listen. In some of our initiatory processes in Africa, you do not pass your initiation until you truly hear what the tree has had to say. And if it means that you're sitting there for 3 months until the tree speaks, you're sitting there for 3 months until the tree speaks. And they know when you're pretending that the tree has spoken. They know, you know, because the tree has a very particular language. You know, so how do we learn to listen?
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rutendo.